Just after dark on July 20th, 1970, a truck driver was working his way along a narrow mountain road in Hiroshima Prefecture, Japan. He had driven this route before. He knew every curve, every guardrail, every place where the cedar forest pressed in close against the asphalt. As he crossed the bridge near the Rokunohara Dam, something stepped into his headlights. He would later describe it as the size of a calf. It crossed the road in front of his truck, moving on two legs, and disappeared into the trees on the other side. He didn't know it yet, but he had just become the first official witness in one of the strangest chapters in the history of unexplained creatures. Because the thing in his headlights wasn't a bear. Japan has no wild apes that size, and it wasn't a man. The people of the region would soon give it a name, the Hibagon, Japan's Bigfoot, and over the next 4 years, an entire town would mobilize to catch it. There are police reports, there are plaster casts, there is a government office, a cash bounty, and a photograph. They didn't just see it, they budgeted for it.
Here's what makes this case different than anything else we've covered on this channel. By October of 1974, the town office had logged 29 official sighting reports. Tracks were found in the snow measuring 8 inches. One trackway ran for nearly 1,000 feet through the forest.
And the town government did something I have never seen anywhere else in the world. They offered 5,000 yen to any resident who spotted the creature. At the time, the starting monthly salary for a town employee was 14,900 yen. One glimpse of this thing paid a third of a month's wages. The Japanese press gave this period a name. They called it the Hibagon riot. I'm Alex, and on this channel, we've chased Bigfoot's cousins across the world. We've gone into the Pamir Mountains with Soviet expedition teams. We've followed the Yeren through the forests of Shennongjia. We've walked South Africa's Knysna forest looking for the Otang. But I have never found a case where the monster was written into the municipal budget. Most towns deny their monster, this one put it on the payroll. And the deeper you go into this case, the stranger it gets. Because in August of 1974, at the height of the wave, a driver on a quiet rural road did what nobody else had managed in 4 years. He got a photograph, a dark figure caught in the act of hiding behind a persimmon tree. To this day, it is the only image the local tourist association officially recognizes as the Hibagon. 50 years later, the town has never disowned it. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. 2 months after that photograph was taken, the sighting stopped. Not gradually, not with a final dramatic encounter, they just stopped. The town formally declared the Hibagon riot over. The office closed its doors. 4 years of sightings, dozens of witnesses, a university expedition, a bounty, patrols in the hills, and then silence. What ends a wave like that overnight? And what was it that came back 6 years later, 25 miles to the south, described as bigger than anything seen on Mount Hiba? To understand what happened in Saijo, we have to go back to the beginning, back to the mountain. Mount Hiba rises in the far northeast of Hiroshima Prefecture, near the border with Tottori. This is not the Japan of neon and bullet trains. This is old Japan, steep ravines, dense cedar forests, remote trails that can swallow a hiker for days. The kind of terrain where even now you can walk for hours and hear nothing but your own footsteps. The villages scattered through these hills, Saijo and Hiwa among them, were quiet farming communities. Rice paddies pressed up against the tree line. People lived close to the forest, and the forest had always had a presence in their lives. Because long before 1970, these mountains were already full of stories. Japanese folklore is crowded with yokai, the spirits and creatures said to move through the wooded landscapes. Guardians, tricksters, things that watched from the tree line and were owed a certain respect. The Hibagon didn't arrive in an empty mythology. it walked into one that was thousands of years deep. When the sightings began, some of the older residents didn't ask what the creature was. They asked which one it was. Local folklore holds that the creature lives somewhere in the vast Hibagon highlands, a sprawl of peaks and gorges that even experienced hikers treat with respect. Cryptozoologists who visited the area during the 1970s came away saying the same thing. The terrain is perfect for an animal that does not want to be found. Steep ravines that funnel sound away from trails. Cedar canopy so dense that midday looks like dusk. Whole valleys where the only way in is the way you came. If you wanted to design a hiding place for a creature the size of a man, you would design this mountain. And unlike the endless wilderness of North America, where a Sasquatch has half a continent to disappear into, Mount Hiba is an island of wild country surrounded by farms and villages. Whatever lived up there was living close to people, sometimes, as we're about to see, far too close. There's one more thing you need to know about this place, and I'll say it carefully because it matters. This is Hiroshima Prefecture. 25 years before the first sighting, this region lived through one of the darkest moments in human history. The generational weight of that is real, and some researchers would later point to it. We'll come back to that. By 1970, the mountain villages were also changing in quieter ways. Japan's economic miracle was pulling young people toward the cities. The forests were seeing fewer woodcutters and charcoal burners than they had in generations. And the wild edges of the prefecture were growing wilder. If something had been holding back from human eyes for a long time, the early 70s were the moment the woods got a little emptier and a little safer for it to move. I personally think the setting matters more in this case than almost any we've covered. The Pacific Northwest is vast and anonymous. Mount Hiba is not. These are small communities where everyone knows everyone, where a witness isn't a stranger on the internet. He's your neighbor, your postman, the farmer whose field touches yours. When this place starts seeing something, that means something. And in the summer of 1970, this place started seeing something. The truck driver's sighting near the Rokunohara Dam on July 20th was the first to be officially logged. But it did not stay alone for long, 3 days. That's all it took. On July 23, 1970, a farmer was working near the edge of his land when the tall grass in front of him moved. And then something stood up out of it. He described a creature as tall as an average man, covered head to foot in black fur. But it wasn't the fur that stayed with him, it was the face. He called it grotesque, a terrible face. And set into that face were eyes he described as piercing, intelligent. Hold on to that word, intelligent. Because it is going to come up again and again in this story. Witness after witness, year after year, people who never met each other kept reaching for the same description. Not the blank stare of an animal, something that looked back at you and understood. Around that same period, the creature was seen again. And this sighting might be the most unsettling of all. Not because of what it did, but because of where it was. It was seen walking through a rice paddy near the town of Saijo. Cultivated land, open ground, in daylight. Whatever this thing was, it was not hiding in the deep wilderness waiting to be found. It was coming down to them. And ask yourself, what kind of animal does that? Bears avoid open farmland in daylight. Deer bolt at the first scent of man. Even the boldest macaque troop works the edges of a village, not the middle of a working paddy. The witnesses weren't describing an animal that had wandered out of the forest by mistake. They were describing something that moved through human spaces like it had decided the rules didn't apply to it. Among the early accounts, one stands out for how frightening it must have been. A group of elementary school students was out picking wild mushrooms in the forests around Mount Hiba when an ape-like creature began crashing through the brush near them. According to the account, it became agitated by their presence. It started snapping branches, making noise, doing everything it could to drive them off. The children fled in terror and told their teacher what had happened. When a group of adults returned to the spot, the creature was gone, but the forest told the story for it. Smashed underbrush, branches that hadn't been cut or broken but twisted off. Think about the strength that takes. Try twisting a living green branch off a tree sometime. Now imagine the limb is thick as your wrist. By the end of 1970, 12 sightings had been reported. 12 in a quiet farming district where nothing ever happened in the space of a few months. And then, in December, the mountain gave them something they could hold. Tracks in the snow, 8 inches long, pressed into the white slopes of Mount Hiba. The police made a plaster cast, and that cast was preserved at the Shobara police station. More tracks would surface in the years that followed. The largest measured a full 12 inches. One trackway ran unbroken for nearly 1,000 feet. And here's the detail that I can't let go of. The prints were barefoot, and they showed opposable toes, like the feet of a great ape. 1,000 feet. Pace that out sometime. That is not a hoaxer stamping a few prints near a trail for a laugh. That is a continuous line of strides moving through mountain terrain, in snow, by something that left no boot marks, no sled tracks, no trace of how it got there or where it went. Japan has no great apes, not one. The largest primate native to these islands is the Japanese macaque, a monkey that stands about as tall as your knee. Whatever pressed those prints into the snow of Mount Hiba, it was not supposed to exist. By now, the reports were no longer staying local. The newspapers had picked up the story, and the name Hibagon, born from the mountain itself, was spreading. And as the publicity grew, something else grew with it: unease. Because the people of these villages were not thrill seekers enjoying a local legend. They were farmers whose children walked forest roads to school. The sightings kept coming, the descriptions kept matching, and the creature kept appearing closer to the places where people lived. The question hanging over every dinner table was simple. What does it want?
12 sightings in one season. Tracks with opposable toes in a country that has no apes. The witnesses didn't know each other, but they all described the same face. But before we go any further, let's build the creature the witnesses were describing, because the Hibagon is not just a smaller Sasquatch, and that's exactly what makes it so interesting.
The composite that emerges from the reports is remarkably consistent. A bipedal figure roughly 5 feet tall. A thick, gorilla-like body, with some witnesses describing a torso twice as broad as a man's. Fur ranging from reddish-brown to black, with a few reports of a white patch on the chest or arms. And then there's the head. Witnesses consistently described it as oversized for the body and shaped like an inverted triangle. Wide at the top, narrowing toward the chin, a face covered in bristles with a snub nose. And those eyes, always the eyes, glaring, intelligent, aware. Several witnesses added one more detail: the smell. A foul odor that hung around the creature and lingered after it was gone. If you followed this channel for a while, you know that detail should make the hair on your neck stand up. The same thing is reported around Sasquatch in the Pacific Northwest, around the Yowie in Australia, around the skunk ape in Florida. Different continents, same stench. A few of you in the comments on our Yeren video pointed out how that creature's reddish hair matched old Chinese accounts going back centuries, and asked how these regional cousins compare. Here's the honest answer: they are almost the same, and it's the almost that fascinates me. The Yeren of Shennongjia is taller. The Otang of the Knysna forest is leaner, smoother. The Almasty of the Caucasus is stockier, more human. And the Hibagon is smaller than all the classic descriptions, 5 feet instead of 8, with that strange triangular head no one else reports. Skeptics will tell you that's evidence these are all just local folklore, each culture inventing its own monster. But flip that logic over. If people were simply copying the American Bigfoot, why would the details be different? A copied story keeps the details. An observed animal varies by region. Every species on Earth does. And there are 2 more ways the Hibagon refuses to behave like an imported legend. And both of them should bother you. The first is geography. Bigfoot sightings sprawl across the entire Pacific Northwest and far beyond. Thousands of reports scattered over hundreds of thousands of square miles. The Hibagon sightings are almost entirely confined to one small cluster of mountains around Mount Hiba. A borrowed myth spreads everywhere because stories travel. An animal stays in its territory. The Hibagon stayed in its territory. The second is time. Bigfoot reports have flowed steadily across North America for decades, never really peaking, never really stopping. The Hibagon's record looks completely different. A sudden explosion of sightings beginning in 1970, a dramatic peak, and then an ending. That is not the rhythm of folklore. Folklore doesn't have a last chapter. But the life of an animal does. Whatever was walking the slopes of Mount Hiba, it was its own thing. And by 1971, the people living under that mountain had decided they'd seen enough of it. The sightings didn't stop after that first summer. They came back. Summer after summer, through 1971, 1972, 1973, the reports kept arriving, almost always in the warm months. Some researchers suggested the pattern matched human activity, that hunting season was pushing the creature down off the mountain and into contact with people. That seasonal rhythm is worth pausing on because it's one of the most animal-like details in the whole case. Legends don't keep schedules. Hoaxes don't synchronize themselves with the hunting calendar for 4 straight years. But a living thing moving down the slopes, when the high country fills with rifles and dogs, would produce exactly this pattern. Summer sightings, winter tracks, silence in between. Think about what that means for a moment. The theory wasn't that people were wandering into the creature's territory. It was that we were driving it into ours. And the residents of Saijo grew uneasy enough that the local government did something that, as far as I can tell, has no parallel anywhere in the world of unexplained creatures. They opened an office for it, a dedicated municipal department set up by the town to deal with the phenomenon. Its job was to collect eyewitness reports, document the accounts, field the flood of calls from the national media, and organize patrols into the surrounding hills. Reportedly, the town even appointed a special advisor on the creature to reinforce the effort. Stop and sit with that. This was not a fan club. This was not a tourism gimmick, not yet. This was a government bureaucracy with paperwork and staff created because a monster would not stop walking out of the forest. And then came the policy that I still can't quite believe is real. The town government began paying 5,000 yen to residents who spotted the creature. Officially, the money was framed as compensation for the inconvenience caused by a sighting. 5,000 yen in the early 1970s was serious money. The starting monthly salary for a town government employee was 14,900 yen. So a single glimpse of the Hibagon paid out a third of a month's wages. Now I can hear some of you already, and you're right to ask. Doesn't a bounty like that invite fake sightings? It's a fair question, and it was raised at the time. Suspicions of bogus claims followed the policy around, but here's the counterweight, and it comes from inside the town hall itself. A town official named Iggy, who handled this era, knew some of the witnesses personally. His verdict on them was simple. They were above lying. These were farmers and neighbors, people whose word was their standing in a small community. And honestly, look at who the witnesses were. A truck driver on his regular route, a farmer in his own field, a woman outside her own home, school children who came back terrified. These were not people chasing fame, and in 1970s rural Japan, claiming you'd seen a monster was not a path to respect. For many of them, it was an embarrassment they carried. They reported it anyway. Meanwhile, Hibagon fever was spreading far beyond the hills. This was Japan's post-war boom. Televisions were arriving in homes across the region. And suddenly, the quiet town of Saijo was on the national news. Residents watched their neighbors interviewed on TV. Researchers, journalists, and curious tourists poured in. Summer Hibagon hunts became something of a tradition. Picture what those summers must have looked like from the creature side of the tree line. Lines of searchers moving up the trails, strangers with cameras at the trailheads, patrols organized by the town office sweeping the hills, where a few years earlier, the only sound was a farmer's truck on the damn road. Explorers and amateur research groups arrived from across the country, each one convinced they would be the ones to finally drag Japan's mystery ape into the daylight. None of them did. Year after year, the hunts went up the mountain, and year after year, they came back down with nothing but stories. And yet, in the middle of all that pressure, the sightings continued. Whatever this thing was, it slipped through every patrol, every hunt, every camera. In a search area you could drive across in an afternoon, the once peaceful town had become the center of a national mystery. The press called it the Hibagon riot, and the name stuck. I personally think this is the detail that separates the Hibagon from every other case in our catalog. Witnesses can be doubted, photographs can be argued over, but a government office is a fact. A line item in a budget is a fact. Whatever you believe was on that mountain, the town's response is sitting in the administrative record, and no skeptic can make it disappear. And it wasn't just the town taking this seriously. In 1972, science itself came to Mount Hiba. Kobe University is one of Japan's respected national universities. And in 1972, it sent an investigation to the Mount Hiba area with a clear mission. Find physical evidence of the creature the locals were calling the Hibagon. Let that register. This was not a tabloid stunt or a weekend monster hunt. A real university dispatching a real field investigation to look for an unknown primate in the mountains of Hiroshima Prefecture. That alone tells you how seriously the wave of sightings was being taken at the highest levels. Around the same time, the police gathered their own evidence. At a construction site, officers made plaster casts of tracks allegedly left by the creature. Physical impressions taken by law enforcement preserved in official custody. So what did the experts find? Here's the record stated plainly because this channel doesn't hide from it. The Kobe University investigation found no evidence of the creature and closed its inquiry. The plaster casts were examined and ruled inconclusive. Case closed, right? That's certainly how it was supposed to read. The university packed up, the experts went home. The official position settled into a comfortable nothing to see here. But walk through what inconclusive actually means. It does not mean fake. It does not mean hoax. It means the evidence could not be resolved either way. The tracks were not proven to be the creatures. They were also never proven to be anything else. And think about what finding nothing actually proves in terrain like this. The expedition spent its days in a landscape of ravines and cedar dark where, as we covered earlier, you could hide an army. Wildlife biologists sometimes spend years trying to lay eyes on animals they know for certain are there. Absence of evidence on Mount Hiba isn't a verdict. It's a Tuesday. There's a strange footnote to the cast story too. That plaster impression taken in December of 1970 didn't get thrown out when the investigations wound down. It was kept at the Shobara police station and later passed on for public display. The official evidence file was closed, but nobody was quite willing to throw the evidence away. Make of that what you will. And here's the problem that the official record can't explain. The university left in 1972. The sightings did not. They continued the next summer, and the summer after that was the biggest year the mountain had ever seen. Whatever was up there didn't care that the experts had gone home. In fact, the year that followed would produce the most famous moment in the entire case. The moment somebody finally got a picture. 1974 was the peak, the busiest year of the entire wave. Dozens of witnesses came forward, the local newspapers covered every development, and the creature was now famous across all of Japan. Something had changed. In the early years, the Hibagon was a glimpse in the grass, a shape at the edge of a field. By 1974, it was crossing roads in front of vehicles, appearing near homes, showing itself in ways it never had before. Researchers argue to this day about why. Was the mountain running out of food? Was the constant human pressure squeezing it out of its last hiding places? Or had it simply stopped caring whether we saw it? The reports from that year read like a creature growing bolder. On June 20th, a driver watched it cross a road in a series of hopping leaps, a strange bounding gait that witnesses struggled to compare to anything they knew. On July 15th, it came to a woman's home. She saw it near her house and described it as very ape-like, like a gorilla walking on two legs about 5 feet tall. Not deep in the forest, not on a remote mountain road, near her house. On August 8th, a man on a mountain road near Sakawa reported a hair-covered figure about the same height, but with a torso he estimated at twice the width of a human's. The same compact, impossibly broad silhouette, again and again. And then came August 15th, 1974, the day of the photograph. A motorist was driving a quiet rural road when he spotted a large, blackish animal moving near the roadside on all fours. As his vehicle approached, the creature did something no ordinary animal does. It sensed the car, rose up off its front limbs, and stood. Then it walked away on two legs. The driver stopped the car, and in the moments that followed, he managed to take a single photograph, capturing the dark figure as it tried to conceal itself behind a persimmon tree. Nearby, fresh footprints were found measuring 8 inches. The image itself is exactly what you would expect from a startled man with a 1970s camera. Blurry, degraded, a dark mass half hidden behind the tree, frozen in the act of hiding. Critics have spent 50 years saying it could be nothing more than a tree trunk, a trick of shadow and grain. And looking at a still that rough, I understand why the argument has never died. But before you file it away as nothing, consider 2 things. First, the behavior. The photograph doesn't show a creature posing or charging or performing. It shows something hiding, slipping behind cover the way an intelligent animal avoids being seen. That is a strange thing for a tree trunk to be doing, and a stranger thing for a hoaxer to fake in 1974 in front of a moving car, with seconds to work with. And remember what the driver said happened before the shutter clicked. The thing was on all fours, it sensed the vehicle, and it stood up and walked away on 2 legs. That sequence, an animal switching between 4 limbs and 2, has haunted this case from the beginning because it matches nothing in Japan's forest. Not a bear, which can rear up but doesn't walk away upright. Not a monkey, nothing. Second, the endorsement. 50 years have passed. The town had every opportunity to quietly bury the picture and every reason to once the laughter started. Instead, it remains the only image the local tourist association officially recognizes as the Hibagon. To this day, the town never disowned it. One more detail from that roadside, and it's the one skeptics never seem to mention. The footprints found near the persimmon tree were fresh, 8 inches pressed into the ground where the figure had been standing. Tree trunks are many things. They are not 8 inches of fresh footprints.
One photograph in 4 years. Not posing, not charging, but hiding. And 50 years later, the town still stands behind it. By the end of 1974, the official tally at the town office had reached 29 reports. The wave had never been stronger. The creature had been bolder. Everyone braced for what the next summer would bring.
Nobody could have guessed the answer. Nothing. The next summer would bring nothing at all. In October of 1974, a final sighting was logged in the records of the town office. At the time, no one knew it was the final one. It was just another report in a file that had been growing for 4 years. And then the file stopped growing. The reports didn't taper off over years the way a fading legend slowly loses steam. They stopped. The creature that had been seen crossing roads, walking through rice paddies, and standing outside a woman's home simply ceased to appear. The town waited. Then it did what bureaucracies do. It wrapped up. The city of Saijo formally announced the end of the Hibagon riot, and the office that had been created to track the creature closed its doors. By June of 1975, the consultation center was shut for good. Think about how strange that paperwork must have felt to fill out. 4 years, 29 official reports, a university expedition, police plaster casts, cash payments, patrols in the hills, national television, and at the end of it all, a closed office and an open question. No body was ever found, nothing was ever captured, no explanation was ever produced. The town that spent the 1970s hunting its own Bigfoot quietly filed the last report and moved on because there was nothing left to hunt. And the silence raises questions that are somehow worse than the sightings. If it was an animal, where did it die? A 5-foot creature doesn't decompose into nothing. In hills walked by hunters every season. No bones, no carcass, no remains have ever come off that mountain. If it was a hoax, why did it end? Hoaxers don't retire undefeated at the peak of national attention with a bounty on the table and television crews begging for more. The most famous monster in Japan was worth more in 1975 than it had ever been. And whoever or whatever was behind it walked away from all of that forever without ever being caught or confessing. And if it simply left, then you have to ask the question I'll put to you directly. What does it say about a creature that endured 4 years of patrols, hunts, cameras, and crowds, and chose the exact moment to vanish that left every single question unanswered? What I personally can't get past is this. The office didn't close because they found the answer. It closed because the questions stopped showing up. There's a difference between a mystery that gets solved and a mystery that just walks away from you. And the second kind is so much worse. It doesn't give you an ending. It gives you a silence. And if you've been enjoying how deep this rabbit hole goes, this is the moment to subscribe because this story is not over. The silence on Mount Hiba lasted 6 years. And what broke it was not the creature the witnesses remembered. It was something that should not have been possible. We'll get there in a moment. But first, we owe it to this case to ask the hard question. What do the skeptics say was really on that mountain? Because for once, they have a genuinely interesting answer, and for once, the numbers are what kill it. When a wave of sightings this well-documented refuses to go away, explanations pile up around it. The Hibagon collected 4. Let's take them seriously, one at a time, because this case has earned that. The leading theory is the macaque. The Japanese macaque, the famous snow monkey, is the only wild primate in Japan. The idea goes like this. A large male, perhaps a former alpha, driven out of his troop, was living a solitary life in the forests around Mount Hiba. Lone males do wander. They do behave strangely. And a startled human catching a glimpse through the trees could inflate a monkey into a monster. It's a tidy theory until you put the numbers next to each other. An average male Japanese macaque stand about 22 inches tall, roughly knee height on a grown man. It weighs around 25 pounds, the size of a small dog with brownish-gray fur, a bright pink face, and a stub of a tail. Now line up the witnesses. A creature the size of a calf crossing a road. A figure as tall as a man standing up out of the grass. A torso twice the width of a human's. A 5-foot biped seen near a woman's house in daylight by a resident of a farming community who had seen macaques her entire life. These are not people who would mistake a monkey for a monster. Macaques are part of daily life in rural Japan. They raid gardens, they sit on rooftops. Asking these witnesses to misidentify one is like asking a Montana rancher to mistake a house cat for a grizzly. The silhouette isn't exaggerated, it's a different silhouette entirely. And the macaque theory has a quieter problem: the footprints. A macaque's foot is a small, narrow thing. The casts and tracks from Mount Hiba ran from 8 to 12 inches, barefoot, with opposable toes spread like a great ape's. You cannot inflate a monkey's footprint with fear. The snow holds what the snow holds. The second theory is the escaped animal, an ape that got loose from a zoo or a circus and made the mountain its home. There's just one problem, and it's fatal. No zoo, no circus, no facility anywhere ever reported a missing ape. The theory explains everything except how it could possibly have happened. It's a non-explanation wearing a lab coat. Some versions of these theories add a tidy ending. They suggest the lone animal, whatever it was, eventually died of old age, and that's why the sighting stopped. One version even proposes it died around 1982. But look at the calendar and watch that theory fall apart. The Saijo sightings didn't fade out toward 1982. They stopped cold in October of 1974 at full strength at the absolute peak of the wave. An old animal dying gives you a slow trickle of final sightings. It does not give you a hard stop. And it certainly doesn't explain why something matching the description surfaced 25 miles away 6 years later. Hold that thought. The third theory is cultural. In the years before the sightings, the Japanese film Half Human had put an abominable snowman story into the national imagination, and skeptics suggest the Hibagon wave was pop culture echoing back as panic. Maybe that primed some minds, but movies don't twist branches off trees, and they don't leave 1,000 feet of footprints in the snow. And the fourth theory is the one I'll handle with care because it deserves it. Some researchers have pointed to the weight of history in this region, suggesting that a community carrying the generational trauma of Hiroshima might be prone to collective fear taking on a shape. I won't mock that idea. The scars there are real, and I have nothing but respect for what those communities endured. But notice what that theory quietly admits. It can explain why people might be afraid. It cannot explain 8-inch footprints with opposable toes, photographed casts in a police station, or a physical figure on a roadside film frame. Fear doesn't press its feet into snow. Every explanation covers a piece of the case. Not one of them covers all of it. And not one of them even attempts to cover what happened next. For 6 years after the office closed, the record stayed silent. The Hibagon riot faded into memory, the television crews moved on, and the cedar forests of Mount Hiba kept whatever they knew to themselves. Then, in October of 1980, in the mountain village of Yamano, north of the city of Fukuyama, and roughly 25 miles south of Mount Hiba, something hairy and upright was seen fleeing across a river with that same strange bounding gait. The locals there gave it a new name, the Hibagon. Same description, same movement, new mountain. The following year, 1981, it was reported again in the same area, this time on a road near a health center. Notice that nobody in Yamano was waiting for a monster. The Hibagon riot had been declared over for 6 years. The office was closed, the bounty was gone. The television crews had long since moved on. There was no reward and no fame waiting for these witnesses. Just an upright, hair-covered figure bounding across a river in a place with no reason to invent one. Now pull up a map in your head, 25 miles south. If this was the same creature, then sometime after the autumn of 1974, it left the slopes of Mount Hiba and moved. Right when the hunts were at their peak, right when the patrols were in the hills, and every farmer was watching the tree line for a 5,000 yen payday. It left when the pressure was highest, and it surfaced again 2 mountain ranges away after the searching stopped. You can call that coincidence. To me, it looks like the behavior of something that understood it was being hunted. But it's the last report in the file that breaks the entire pattern, and honestly, it's one of the strangest single accounts in any case we've ever covered. 1982, Mitsugi, nearly 20 miles west of Yamano. A witness reported a creature far bigger than anything ever described on Mount Hiba. Not 5 feet, 6.5 feet tall, the full Sasquatch scale. And reportedly, it was not empty-handed. The witness described it holding what looked like a stone tool, like an axe. Let me be straight with you about the sourcing here, because that's how we do things on this channel. This account is thinner than the Saijo-era reports. There was no office logging sightings anymore, no police casts, no bounty paperwork. It survives in the cryptozoological record, and the tool detail rests on that single witness. It is the only account in the entire history of the Hibagon of the creature being that large or carrying anything at all. But that's exactly what makes it so hard to dismiss as a copycat story. A copycat repeats the famous details. The triangle head, the 5-foot frame. This witness broke every detail and described something new. Either he invented a worse version of a famous monster for no reason, or 12 years after a truck driver saw something cross the road at Rakunohara, somebody in Mitsugi met what it had become, or what it had been all along.
5 feet tall in 1970, 6.5 feet tall in 1982, and in its hand a stone tool. That's not how legends fade. That's how they grow up. After Mitsugi, the record goes quiet for good. No more Yamagon, no more Hibagon. Just a scatter of rumors trailing into the decades. And 3 mountains that never explain themselves.
3 names for it in the end. Hibagon on Mount Hiba, Yamagon in Yamano, and whatever stood in Mitsugi with a stone tool in its hand. One creature moving south through the hills over 12 years, or 3 different things wearing the same shape. The record allows both answers. The record refuses to choose. Drive into Shobra City today, the modern municipality that absorbed old Saijo, and you'll find the Hibagon waiting for you. It's on the souvenir shelves. It's in the local museum displays. There are folklore tours up toward Mount Hiba. The town that once hunted its monster now sells it. It would be easy to smile at that and move on. But don't move on too fast, because hanging in that same town is the persimmon tree photograph, still officially endorsed, still unexplained after half a century. The merchandise is cute, the photo isn't. And the people who were there have never let it go. The school children who fled that creature in the mushroom woods are in their 60s now. The farmers who logged reports at the town office have grown old under the same mountain. Researchers still travel to Shobra to interview them, and the stories they tell have not softened with the decades. Ask around Saizhou today and you will not find a town that thinks it imagined something. You will find a town that thinks it lost track of something. And step back far enough and you can see the pattern this channel keeps running into over and over all around the world. The Soviet Union sent expeditions into the Pamirs after the Almaty. Chinese teams went into Shennongjia after the Yeren. A Japanese town opened a government office and put a bounty on the Hibagon. Every time the same ending. The searches don't conclude with proof the creature never existed. They conclude with the searchers going home. The institutions run out of money or patience or nerve. The mountains never run out of anything. That's the part that gets me every time I cover one of these cases. We always frame it as the creature failing to show itself. But you could just as easily frame it the other way. In every one of these hunts, on every continent, the creature only had to do one thing to win: outlast us. And in every single case, it did. We'll be adding another chapter to that pattern soon because there's a town in Australia with its own unfinished business of this kind. And that story is coming to the channel. Some of you already know the one I mean. But for now, we end where we started. On a dark road near the Rakunohara Dam in the summer of 1970, where a truck driver's headlights caught something the world still cannot name. 29 reports, a government office, a bounty worth a third of a month's pay, a university that found nothing, casts that proved nothing, a photograph that settled nothing. 4 years of hunting and not one capture, not one body, not one answer. Half a century has passed since the office closed its doors. The dam road is still there. The persimmon trees still fruit in the autumn. The cedar forests above Saizhou are darker and emptier now than they were in 1970. And the hiking trails into the Hibagon Taishaku highlands still post their quiet warnings about wildlife. Every few years, someone reports a strange sound up there, a shape between the trees, and the old name surfaces again in the comment sections of Japanese forums. The town smiles about it now. The mountain has never smiled about anything. So somewhere in the cedar forests above Saizhou, there is one of two things. There's nothing at all. And an entire town spent the 1970s chasing its own shadow with patrols and paperwork. Or there is something that watched them search, season after season, learned exactly what we are, and simply waited us out.
They closed the office in 1975, but nobody ever told the mountain the search was over. Maybe something up there is still waiting for us to come back. I'm Alex. Thank you for walking the mountain with me. Tell me in the comments which one you believe, because on this channel, that verdict has always belonged to you. I'll see you in the next one.